All right, readers. I want to tell you that last night when I was reading my niece her bedtime story of Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears, I started thinking about Goldilocks a little bit. I thought to myself, wow, she was a really nosy person and she was quite picky too. I know that she was nosy because she wandered into a house in the middle of the woods all by herself. No one was home and she did not have permission to enter, but she still went in anyways. That's pretty nosy to me. And I thought she was picky because she was really specific about which porridge she wanted to eat and which bed she wanted to sleep in. Now, the book doesn't say the words nosy or picky, but those are just some thoughts I had after paying close attention to her actions, her thoughts, and her words. Knowing these different things about her made me understand why she did what she did, and then it overall really helped me understand the story better. So readers, today, I want you all to know that when we know our characters and their different traits, this helps us understand the story much better. So today we're going to read a story, and we're going to talk about something called character traits. Has anyone ever heard that word, trait? Who can tell me what a trait is? That's right. A trait is something that describes a person, or in this case, our characters. I use the examples of nosy and picky to describe Goldilocks. Can I get some examples of traits that we might use to describe our characters when we read our stories? Brave, smart, bossy, lazy. Wonderful examples. And I want you guys to all know that traits can be positive or sometimes they can be negative too. They are just words that we use to describe our characters. Keep in mind when we are using these traits to describe our characters, we must have evidence. Good readers provide evidence. So meaning that we must explain why this character is brave and why this character is lazy and so on. As I read our story today, I want you all to think about what our character says, what she does, what are her actions, what she feels or thinks. All of these will help you identify some traits she might have. I have a character sheet reference for you to look at while we read. It shows character trait, words that describe a character's personality or qualities that make them who they are. And it says things to consider, words. What does the character say? Maybe she says it out loud. Maybe she says it to another person. Maybe she's talking to her pet. What does she say? Actions. What is something our character does? Does she do something really specific that can give her a good trait? And lastly, feelings or thoughts. What or how do they think? Or how do they feel? So pay attention to thoughts, actions, and words throughout our story. All right, so the book I have today is called Ada Twist, Scientist. Ada Twist, Scientist. After hearing that, what's one prediction that we might be able to make while we're reading the story? That's right. That because the title rhymes, we might think that there's going to be some rhymes within the book. I think that's a wonderful guess, and I think you're right. Ada Twist, Scientist. Ada Marie, said not a word till the day she turned 3. She bounced in her crib and looked all around, observing the world, but not making a sound. She learned how to climb and made her big break with a trail of chaos left in her wake. She ran through the day, chasing each sound and sight, and didn't slow down till she conked out at night. I think you were right. I think I'm hearing some rhymes. Her parents were frazzled, but tried not to freak, as Ada grew bigger, but still did not speak. Clearly young Ada, with lots in her head, would have something to say when it ought to be said. That's just what happened when Ada turned 3. She tore through the house on a fact-finding spree and climbed up the clock just as high as she could. Her parents yelled, "Stop!" as all good parents would. Ada's chin quivered, but she did not cry. She took a deep breath and simply asked, "Why?" Why does it tick and why does it talk? Why don't we call it a granddaughter clock? Why are there pointy things stuck to a rose? Why are there hairs inside of your nose? She started with why, then what, how, and when. At bedtime, she came back to why once again. She drifted to sleep as her dazed parents smiled at the curious thoughts of their curious child. Of their curious child, who wanted to know what the world was about. They kissed her and whispered, "You'll figure it out." Her parents kept up with their high-flying kid, whose questions and chaos both grew as she did. I see why, what, how, when, why. What does it look like? What does it do? Why does it? How does it? Why doesn't it? Wow. Even Miss Greer found her hands were quite full when young Ada's chaos wreaked havoc at school. Havoc, that's a funny word. Does anyone have a guess of what havoc might mean? I'll read it again. Even Miss Greer found her hands were quite full when young Ada's chaos wreaked havoc at school. Looking at the picture, I would guess that too. I would guess that havoc means like messy or destruction or something. Awesome use of context. But this much was clear about Miss Ada Twist. She had all the traits of a great scientist. Ada was busy that first day of spring, testing the sounds that made mockingbirds sing, when a horrible stench whacked her right in the nose. A pungent aroma that curled up her toes. Ooh, does anyone know what stench means? You're right, a smell, a bad smell. That's why I grabbed my nose and stench. "Zowie!" said Ada, which got her to thinking. What is that source of that terrible stinking? How does a nose know there's something to smell? And does it still stink if there's no nose to tell? She rattled off questions and tapped on her chin. She started to start where she ought to begin. A mystery, a riddle, a puzzle, a quest. This was the moment that Ada loved best. Ada did research to learn all she could of smelling and smells, both the stinky and the good. One hypothesis Ada thought could be true. That terrible stink came from Dad's cabbage stew. She tested and tested, but soon Ada knew it was time to come up with hypothesis 2. Hypothesis. I know you guys are learning about this in science. What is a hypothesis? You're right. Something that can be tested, maybe an explanation for something. Then, Zowie! The stink struck again, just like that. Hypothesis 2. It's caused by the cat. That cat couldn't make such a stink on its own. It needed perfume and some fancy cologne. So young Ada tested. The test was a flop. She started again, but her parents yelled, "Stop!" Why did her parents yell stop? You're right. She was going to put the cat in the washer in the dryer. That's not good. Ada Marie, to the thinking chair now. By the time we count 3. Oh. "Enough," said her mother. "That's it," said her dad. Her parents were frustrated, frazzled, and mad. "Why?" Ada questioned. Her mother said, "No." "What?" Ada queried. Her father said, "Go. You've ruined our supper. You've made the cat stink. Enough with your questions. Now sit there and think." She looked at her parents. Her heart turned to goo. Poor Ada Twist didn't know what to do. She sat all alone by herself in the hall, and Ada once more could say nothing at all. And so Ada sat, and she sat, and she sat, and she thought about science and Stu and the cat and how her experiments made such a big mess. Did it have to be so? Is that part of success? Are messes a problem? And while she was thinking, what was the source of that terrible stinking? Ada Marie did what scientists do. She asked a small question, and then she asked 2. And each of those led her to 3 questions more, and some of those questions resulted in 4. As Ada got thinking, she really dug in. She scribbled her questions and tapped on her chin. She started at why, and then what, and how, and when. At the end of the hall, she reached why once again. Her parents calmed down and they came back to talk. They looked at the hallway and just had to gawk. No patch of their paint could be seen on the wall. The thinking chair was now the great thinking hall. What does gawk mean? That's a funny word, gawk. Yeah. If we look closely at our parents, they're kind of looking funny, like, in shock. You're right. They watched their young daughter and sighed as they did. What would they do with this curious kid who wanted to know what the world was about? They smiled and whispered, we'll figure it out. And that's what they did, because that's what you do when your kid has a passion and a heart that is true. They remade their world. Now they're all in the act of helping young Ada sort fiction from fact. She asks lots of questions. How could she resist? It's all in the heart of a young scientist. And as for that smell, what can Ada Twist do but learn all she can with her friends in grade 2? Will they discover the stink that curls the toes? Well, that's a question. And someday, who knows? The end. Wow, that was a fun story. I really enjoyed that. So now, readers, I'm going to give an example of a trait that I saw within Ada Twist. I think Ada Twist was determined. And I think this because she did not quit when she smelled that stinky smell, right? She wanted to find out what it was, and she was going to go and not stop until she figured it out, testing out her different hypotheses. Now, I used her actions, right? She went and tested out different things. She thought it was the stew. Maybe she thought it was the cat. And I also paid attention to her words and thoughts, because these are things she said out loud or thought within the book. Now, can someone else give me a trait that they thought they saw within Ada? And remember, good readers use evidence to explain their thinking. Okay, who has an idea? Curious, okay. And what told you in the story that Ada was curious? Wonderful. I love how you had a specific example in your mind to tell us about why you thought she was curious. That was a great use of paying attention to her feelings and thoughts. Okay, what's another trait that someone can think of? Awesome. I definitely thought she was smart too, but what makes you say that? Good use of evidence. I love it, readers. Now, I want you to turn and talk to someone that's sitting right next to you and discuss with them. I want you to think of maybe one or two other traits that came into your mind when we were reading this story. And remember, we use our evidence. I hope you were paying close attention to her words, her actions, and her feelings and thoughts. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes to discuss with your partner. After allowing each group to present a trait with their reasoning, then I would transition. It seems like everyone is getting the hang of finding character traits and providing evidence from the story. When everyone is getting ready to start independent reading time today, I want you all to use a piece of scrap paper or maybe some sticky notes you have to write down different traits that you see within your character and provide evidence. You can put a sticky note right in the story, right where you think. You can say, oh, look, it looks like she's curious. She's asking lots of questions. Mark it. Put a sticky note right there. And I'm going to be walking around and coming and discussing with you what traits you're finding within your different characters. And I want to see why you think this. I want to see your reasoning and your evidence. Does anyone have any questions? Perfect. We're going to go begin. Let's begin our independent work time, and everyone have a story. After independent work time is done, today, readers, we learned that paying really close attention to our characters' words, actions, and feelings, our thoughts, can tell us a lot about the character. It can help us describe our character by using traits. And if we know our characters more, we're able to understand our story better. Wonderful work today, readers.